In this demo, I will show you how StackAI can help you easily create an agent to process refunds. For example, here you can see that there is a refund/expense agent. And what I'll do is select a type of refund. In this case, I'm going to be showing an example of a corporate travel. In this case, I'm going to be showing an example of an employee corporate travel expense refund, and I'll select meals. And then I'll also upload a receipt. Click submit. The model will run and analyze whether an employee's meal expense The model will run and analyze whether an employee's meal expense can be refunded according to the company's reimbursement policy. So in this example, the model will analyze whether an employee's meal expense from a restaurant will be refunded according to the company's reimbursement policy. So for this employee, it looks like the total receipt was for $200, and since the policy limit is $600, the AI agent determined that the meal expense can be refunded because it was under the maximum limit of the policy. If you want, you can also have the AI agent if you want, you can also have the AI agent create and automatically If you want, you can have the AI agent automatically create a ticket for this invoice and then make sure that it gets processed correctly. Great, now I'll go into how to build an actual AI agent that can do this. First, you want to go into our workflow builder and hit create. You want to use the new project template and then name the project. I'll name mine refund/expense agent. In the project template, it'll give you one input node, one output node, and one model. We want to customize this now with this foundation, we now want to customize on building an expense report agent. With this foundation, we now can customize building an expense refund agent. With this foundation, we can now customize it and add on top of it to build an expense refund agent. So it gave us one. I want to start by adding a file input node and then making sure that it is connected to the AI model. So in total, you should have two input nodes, one for the user to type in a prompt, and one for the user to type in a prompt, and the other for them to upload a file. For the first input node, it will most likely be an example of an employee that is submitting a ticket for a refund. In our workflow, we want the user to provide information on the service provided. In our workflow, we want the user to provide information on the service provided. And so I'll do a use case example for travel reimbursement. In our workflow, we want the user to provide information on the service provided. And in this case, it'll be travel reimbursement. In our workflow, we want the user to provide information on the service provided. And in this use case example, it will be travel reimbursement. And then they can add a link to the ticket information, and then they can add a link to a ticket information if they have one. I also want to rename this file to user input. Down below in our files node, we want to rename this node Down below in the files node, I want to rename it to receipt. And here I also want to make sure that the expose as an input button is toggled on. This will force the user to make sure this will allow the end user to upload a file when it goes to the main interface. I want to upload my receipt. And that is our input setup for this agent. Now going into our model, we want to be sure that the two file nodes are connected to the first model node that will pull all the information into a JSON format that will later get sent out. We want to be sure that the two nodes connect to the first model node that will put all the information into a JSON format, which will get later sent to a Google Drive. The first model's instructions will be: to customize this model, you can click the actual model. To customize this model, you can click into it, and then a tab should pull out on the right-hand side. For the model type, I want to be using something bigger than the 4.0 mini, so I'll use the GPT 4.1. And then down below is where we can start making our instructions. So I will delete this sample. So I will delete this sample instructions. And input my own. My instructions for this agent are going to be: you are an expert in extracting information from structured and semi-structured documents. I will provide you with files from invoices that may vary in format and layout, sometimes containing more than one invoice in a single file. Your task is to read the files and give an answer in the following prompt definitions. Here, I just want to note that you just want to be as clear as possible when giving the instructions to your agent. Here, I just want to note to be clear as possible and as detailed as possible when giving instructions to your agent. Down below in the prompt, this is where we now want to link the initial file nodes to the actual model. So I'll delete this sample. And then link it to my actual files. So user input, and then I'll do a backward dash and put the user input file. I'll do the same for our receipt, and then a backward dash to get the receipt file. And then I want to add in our detailed prompt instructions. This one is a bit more detailed, but I will go This one is a bit more detailed, and going through it, I just want to be sure that the AI model is able to read my invoice information and be able to pull the information accurately. So I gave prompt definitions for each row of my data. For example, extracting a list with the following data: CPF, date of request, invoice payer email, employee global ID, employer name, reimbursement reference month based on the invoice data, the ticket link, type of amount requested, total reimbursement type, total amount requested type, reimbursement amount, and to generate a JSON file. I also want to note that when multiple invoices are present in a single file, that the AI model should identify that when multiple invoices are present. I also want to note that when multiple invoices are present in a single file, the model should identify and separate the data for each invoice while maintaining organization. If there are ambiguous or incomplete fields, the model should highlight the fields that cannot be clearly identified or provide possible values found. On top of that, I wanted to note that the model should make sure to ignore irrelevant or duplicate information, to handle the data generically to accommodate different invoicing formats, and if a file has more than one invoice, bring both the data following the same pattern. Now, all this information is going to be different according to the type of information that you are able to provide or what your company needs. However, for this example, this is a pretty thorough introduction into how to create a simple model like this. After adding in your prompts and instructions, I also want to note that if you go below into the tools section, you can also add a tool to create automatic tickets. So for example, if I type in create ticket, it will allow you to create tickets from Zendesk. And this is really helpful when it comes to automating the ticket generation process after a refund is approved. Now I want to create a knowledge drive for where the model can pull the information for the company policies when it comes to different employee refunds. So I want to go into our knowledge base section and link to a Google Drive. Here I'll select a knowledge base, and then I'll select a knowledge base, and you can add your own personal different knowledge bases. However, I've already included one for my example here. And if you go into knowledge bases, this is where you can start adding in your information for your own company. And if you go into knowledge base, this is where you can add information. If you go into knowledge base, this is where you can add your proprietary information regarding employee policies. I want to note that in the Google Drive, there is the database of the employees and the rules of the reimbursement for the company's travel use case. It should be a one-for-one rule for the employee with different columns/categories with information. Usually it is a one rule for one employee with different columns/categories with information if the reimbursement can be accepted or not, depending on the company's travel policy. Then the Google Drive node will connect to this model node. Then the Google Drive node will connect to this model node as well. Then the Google Drive node will connect to the first model, and I also now want to add in my second LLM. So going over to the left-hand side, I will click OpenAI again and drag and drop the model in. I want to be sure to connect the Google Drive node with now the second model, and this will determine whether the employee will be able to receive a refund based on the information like the ticket category and the cost amount. There should also be an output node connected to this. There should also be an output node connected to this model node. There should also be this output node connected to. There should be also another output node connected to the second model node that will generate some information on whether this can be refunded or not. We also want to add two more output nodes, one connecting to the Google Drive file that will start reading the data that was provided in the Google Drive. And then the last output node should be connected to the second AI model, and this will be an output node that will generate some information on whether this can be included or not. And this will be an output node connected that will generate information on whether this employee refund can be, and then this will be an output node that will generate some information on whether it can be refunded or not. Going into the second AI model, like before, I want to choose my model type, and I'll choose the same exact model, the GPT 4.1 for my use case. Similar to the first AI model, I want to be as descriptive as possible in the instructions, so I am going to remove the sample instructions and input my own. For this one, I am still saying that I want to specify down below for the model to use their own rationale to determine if this can be refunded or not based on the individual's criteria. And if it can, I want it to explain what. And if it can, I want it to explain why. And if it can't, I also want it to explain why. So basically, I will ask it to read the receipt of the invoice cost, and then for these instructions, I specify that I want to be able to give the invoice. For this example, I specified that I want to be able to give the model the receipt of the invoice cost, and then its task is to read the receipt file, and given the information on the Google Drive database, determine if the refund fits within each employee's cost limit. And I want the model to determine, using its rationale, if this refund can be refunded or not based on each individual's criteria. If yes, I want it to explain why. If no, I also want it to explain why. Going down into the prompt section, like the first model, I want to be sure that the input nodes are connected to this model. So I'll type in user input and then do a backward slash and connect it to first the user input. Then I'll go connect it to the receipt. And then lastly, I want it connected to the Google knowledge base. Once this is done, this is the general workflow on how to build your own refund agent model. Once this is done, this is pretty much the general workflow on how to build your own expense refund agent. I'll now hit run. And then I also want to hit publish and save. And then I also want to hit publish. Once you're done publishing, you'll go over to the export section and go into the form interface and go into the form interface. Once it's published, you want to go into the export section and go into form interface. You can make your own application name. I'll just name mine Refund/Expense Agent, as well as type in a description. Down below, you can also add your input fields and make them required, as well as add options for the input categories that the users can select, such as meals, hotels, transportation, and then miscellaneous, and then additional. You can also customize your output node. I'll want to select the last output node, as that is the one that has the most information from all the workflow. I want to select the last output node, as this one will be connected to all the rest, and then I'll just change my name of it. And then you can also customize the name of it. So I'll just put refund status. You can also fully white label your experience, so you can add or remove your different avatar styles, as well as configure your security with SSO, as well as password protection. As you can also configure your security with SSO and password protection, as well as other security methods. Now, once you hit save, this is pretty much how you can, once you hit save, I also want to note that if you go into the form interface options and select API, you can export and select API. I also want to note that if you go into the form interface section and select API, this is where you can export it as an API endpoint and attach it to your ticketing system automatically. Now hit save. And this is it for this tutorial on how to create your own refund expense agent using Slack. And this is it for this tutorial on how to create your own refund expense agent using StackAI.